Hello, very good afternoon, everyone. Um, so this is the um, replacement lecture, sort of. Yeah, um, it is going to replace the lecture that we missed last week, and so this is a pre-recorded um, lecture to cover the topic on poverty and inequality. Okay, so as you watch this video, I hope you will be able to follow the lecture with the notes that I have provided for you on the ELIP course page. Okay. All right. Okay. So as I said just now, the topic for week 5, or rather for LU5, is on poverty and inequality. Okay. So I'm sharing, first of all, I'm going to share the notes, yeah, so that you can follow the lecture online. Okay, so the topic is poverty, inequality, and development. Right, let me move this. Okay, what is this doing here? Okay, so uh, I mean we are dealing with the third world countries, and one of the characteristics of third world countries is that of poverty, yeah, and very high inequality. Okay, so this poverty and unequal distribution of incomes are among the common features that you can find in some of these, or almost all of these third world countries. And for some countries, they're not improving. In fact, some are getting worse, yeah, the condition. So if you look into history, in 1970s, um, it's the beginning of changes in perception toward the objectives of economic development. Okay, the previously the concern was on how to improve the GDP per capita, right? So it became obvious around 1970 that the pursuit of development actually intensified poverty. Yeah, this is according to Professor Sachs, in the article, The Development Dictionary in 1992, which you can find on page 29. And according to Bellow in 1989, in the book of Brave New Third World, he said the 1980s have been marked by a sharp increase in poverty and inequality throughout the third world. So what we are saying here is that there have been increasing uh, proportion of the world population in the third world countries in particular, um, who are classified as those who live in poverty. Right, so things are not changing much. In fact, as we have noticed early on, some are getting worse. Okay, so so we are looking at economic growth, but at the same time, this growth doesn't really spread enough to all sectors of the population, all corners of the world and all that. Yeah. So the growth controversy, here there are 7 critical questions. Number 1 is, what is the extent of relative inequality and how is this related to the extent of poverty? Whether the relationship between these two. So second critical questions is, who are the poor? Who are they? And who benefits from economic growth? Is it going to benefit everyone, or is it going to benefit just certain section of the population? The other critical question that we need to ask is whether or not rapid economic growth necessarily cause greater income inequality. In other words, the GDP for the country increase, but are everybody benefiting from the growth, or does it actually contribute to the greater income inequality in the country? And of course, do the poor benefit from the economic growth? And the other two questions are high levels inequality always bad? Yeah, in other words, the difference between the rich and the poor, are they necessarily bad? And the last critical question is, what policies can reduce poverty? Okay, so those are things which are of concern, and we try to address some of these issues, if not all, right? But first of all, so what is poverty anyway? Yeah. Now, there are two actually. One is known as absolute poverty, and this one refers to the conditions where they are lacking the essentials of life. Okay, lack the essentials of life, not enough food, not enough clothing, not enough water supply, electricity, and so on. Okay. The second type of poverty is relative poverty, and this one refers to the lacking the ability to enjoy the standard of living that most other people enjoy. For example, overall, the country is quite a rich country, but there are a small portion of the population who could not enjoy or do not enjoy the same standard of living than that most of the people in the country enjoy. So this is talking about relative poverty. Even though maybe their income is higher than higher than the minimum, I'm sorry, the average income of people in the third world countries, for example, but they are still considered as poor, relatively speaking. Okay, so poverty is actually referring to a state of living on an income which is below half the national average, below half the national average. Yeah. So shortage of common things such as food, clothing, shelter, lack of safe drinking water, which are all factors that determine the quality of life. Yeah. So shortages of those or lacking those. Yeah. So lack of access to opportunities as well. For example, education or unable to attend school and not getting employed, yeah, unemployment, which will add to escape from poverty. So one of the ways to escape from poverty is to be employed, to get salary, yeah, and so on. But if you can't get employment, in other words, you are unable to get jobs and all that, therefore you are not earning, and that actually uh, accounted for the poverty, okay? Because you're not earning anything. And the other characteristics of poverty is that they lack choices. Yeah? Lack of choices. Sorry, it's not lack or choices. Lack of choices. In other words, There's limited choices. For example, if you look at beggars, beggars, those who ask for money or food, yeah, in the urban areas in particular, they beg from others. They don't have any choice, yeah. So they cannot be choosers. Whatever people give them, um, they should accept. Yeah? They cannot just reject and so on. Yeah. All right. So these are some of the images of poverty in many places of the world, both in the East, yeah, East Asia or Central Asia, and also in Africa and so on. Yeah. So these common pictures that you would find, yeah, in all these areas. For example, this one, there is no classroom. This is supposed to be school, and yet um, there is no wall, no roof above the head. What they have is just trees. Yeah. And then this is where poor families, they cook outside their house, right? And children sharing food and the kind of shelter that some of these families live in, yeah, is not a proper housing and so on. Okay, more images. This is example of places where they stay too. Um, Kawasan setinggan lah. Right? So they don't live in housing estate and all that, but they build temporary or maybe their permanent home. Who knows? Yeah, they may be living there for years, but it's on somebody's land and so on, or government land and so on. Yeah, and some people also out of poverty, they look for anything they could sell, yeah, from the garbage collect areas and so on. Yeah. Okay. Also, in Western countries or other developed countries, we do have people who are poor too. Right? And here also another feature or picture rather showing those who are homeless, yeah, at the outskirts of the town or the city, and there in the far end there is the center of the city and so on. So we do have a lot of people also in the urban areas who are poor, homeless as well. Okay, so in short, poverty is still there. Yeah, it's still there. Efforts are being made to improve the situation in all of these countries um, in trying to solve the problem of poverty. Yeah, even though they're still there, but they are declining as well. Yeah. For example, in 2012, the number of people living in poverty was around 902 million, yeah, in the world, or about 13% of the world population. And 7 years later, in 2019, the World Bank estimated the rate of extreme poverty has gone down under 10%, yeah, from 13% to under 10% of the world population. Um, okay, so those who are classified under extreme poverty are those living on less than $2 a day, ya, kurang daripada RM2 satu hari. So while poverty is a global issue, yeah, it is most prevalent in certain part of the world, for example, the sub-Saharan Africa and also in South Asia. Yeah. So these are actually the regions that house the majority of the world's population, Africa and South Asia. Okay. That include Bangladesh, Pakistan, yeah, India too, and so on. Yeah. And also some of the Southeast Asian countries as well. So this slide here that I'm sharing now shows the percent of population living under $2 per day. Okay, so where are they? if you look at the condition in 1980 or 1980s, yeah, most of the world population, right? Most of the world population, except for Europe, yeah, and some part of Central Asia, the no, so like sorry, that's Latin America. So most of these countries are very high population who are living in poverty. Right? For example, we have the East Asian countries and the Pacific. More than 30% of the population were poor. But now in 2011, for example, or 2010, it has gone down to less than 30%. So things are improving. Yeah. The same goes to countries like um, South Asia. But South Asia, although there has been a decrease in the population who are living under $2 per day, but the percentage is still high, about 60% of the population. But the one that is doing very, very well just now is the East Asia, yeah, termasuk negara China, yeah, and particularly negara China. The African state, they don't change that much. The green color here, or rather the dark green color here. The rate of poverty is still high. Okay, so that's so you can see from there. So there is actually a drop in poverty globally, but not in all places, not everywhere you can find that. So the biggest drop in poverty came in East Asia, okay, particularly China and rest of the Southeast Asian countries, where poverty rates have gone down from a worldwide high of 93% 1981 to just 23% in 2011. I'm quite sure the figure has gone down below 20% by now. Yeah. So most of the fall or the decrease in extreme poverty in East Asia actually came from the rise of Chinese economy over the last 3 decades. Jadi negara China telah meningkat dia punya ekonomi bertambah baik. In fact, now as I've said before, China is the world number 2 in terms of GDP uh, or size of economy, yeah, in the world, second after United States of America. Okay, right. So, well, extreme poverty has declined in all of the regions based on World Bank record or estimate. Much still needs to be done in places such as sub-Saharan Africa, where about 69% of the population still live under $2 per day, yeah, as of 2011. And also in South Asia, where the poverty rate is still around 60%. Okay. All right, so that is the scenario as far as poverty in the third world countries are concerned. Okay, so the two things, yeah. Besides poverty, also the issue of inequality, right? So absolute versus relative poverty. Absolute poverty, this refers to the conditions where people are unable to command sufficient resources to satisfy their basic needs. Semuanya tak cukup, ya. While as in the other term or relative poverty, this one refers to the proportion of the population who are poor in relation to the whole population. In other words, there are certain group of people in the country who are less fortunate compared to the others. So even though their income may be higher compared to many other developing countries, but For example, there are certain people who are earning less in relation to kalau ataupun dibandingkan dengan yang lain. So increase in GNP, yeah, gross national product, will definitely help to reduce absolute poverty. Yeah, absolute poverty. It have to reduce that. But the rate of relative poverty will probably change little or remain the same. Jadi there will be portions or percentage of people who are relatively have less income. That's the way to put it. Although the income may be higher or better than income of the third world countries, for example. Yeah. So in other words, there will always be relative poverty, right? Uh, so relative poverty exists in developed as well as less developed countries or developing countries. Okay. Okay. So this is about income inequality. Yeah. So actually, when we talk about relative, sorry, about inequality, we are actually referring to the relative poverty just now. So there are people who are rich, there are people who are poor. Okay. So the rich, okay, they have a lot of property, they have a lot of money. The poor, unfortunately, and the rich people, they're not many, actually. They're small in number compared to those who are poor. So the majority of people who are poor compared to rich people, few, but they are very, very rich. They control the wealth of the world or the country, while as the majority who are poor, they have only very little access to the resources and all that. Okay, so if you look at this cartoon here, um, you can see here, if your parents are rich, for example, or your family is rich, you are likely to be rich as well, you as the children. And then for the poor, I mean, if they are poor, that family also will be apa nama family of the generations of the poor are also likely to be poor, unless, of course, the next generation can improve themselves. But based on observation, based on studies, um, if you are from rich families, you are likely to be rich. Yeah, you belong to the elite group, a small group of people who are rich in the world. Okay, let's look at some facts about poverty globally. So global poverty is actually a very complex issue, which made up of various dimensions, and also the causes are varied as well. Yeah. So in other words, there are various factors which contribute to poverty. So almost half of the world population, yeah, which is over 3 billion people. In other words, the population now is about 8 billion, so almost 4 billion. I would say I need to update this one. 4 billion people are living on less than $2.50 a day. Yeah. And in October 2015, for example, the World Bank updated the international poverty line, a global absolute minimum to $1.90 a day as the poverty income, minimum income, yeah, compared to $1.25 in 2008. And this is done so after taking into account the inflation, yeah. So yeah, so this threshold is intended to reflect the minimum level of income required to meet basic needs, basic needs. However, it may vary from country to country, depending on the purchasing power in those different countries. In other words, some countries, the cost of living may be higher, and in another country may be lower. So it all depends. Yeah? Now people living on $1.90 per day or less a day were defined as living in extreme poverty. Okay, so anybody living on less than $1.90 90 cent a day were considered as poverty. So if you have a family of five, for example, and you're earning less than 10 ringgit or 10, sorry, not ringgit, $10 per day, your family is classified as those living in extreme poverty, right? So among those, yeah, people who are affected, children are disproportionately. In other words, there are a lot of children, yeah, compared to adult. So they are badly affected by poverty, with higher rates of poverty among children than among adults globally. Again, in 2011, for example, 165 million children under the age of 5 were stunted. Stunted meaning you're not growing um, as regularly as other children of the world. Yeah, so stunted growth, reduced rate of growth and development, mainly due to um, okay, sorry, I have to add time. Okay, due to chronic malnutrition. And also preventable diseases like diarrhea and pneumonia takes the lives of 2 million children a year who are too poor to afford proper treatment. And of 2013, 21.8 million people, or million children rather, under 1 year old worldwide had not received the 3 recommended doses of vaccine. And so because they just couldn't afford it, ya, ataupun sebuah negara itu tidak mempunyai ya perkhidmatan tersebut because they're too poor to have that kind of services. Okay, these are some of the some of the pictures, or uh, if you want to click on this later on, yeah, you can click and look at the countries, yeah, um, listed as poor and among the poorest in the world. Okay, so let me just skip this one. Yeah, some of these countries, as I said, is now in Africa and also in South Asia. So poverty is actually not just based on one dimension, for example, just income, but it is multi-dimensional. Okay, in other words, lacking access to healthcare, for example, lacking access to education, clean water, and sanitation. And these are the other dimensions of poverty. So the UNDP and the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative have developed the multi-dimensional poverty index. Sorry, there's something not quite right here. Yeah, or MPI, which considers factors such as health, education, and living standard to provide a more comprehensive measure of poverty. So living standard is based on income, but the other thing is added in the health status and also the level of education in there, right? This is what I was talking about. So MPI is made up the living standard, which is actually um, based on things like drinking water, sanitation, uh, electricity, housing, asset, and so on, yeah, and which can be made by, or rather, uh, can be made easier ataupun boleh didapati uh, kalau kita gaji kita ataupun pendapatan kita meningkat, ya. The other one is education, years in schooling, whether or not people have access to school and how many years of schooling, and so on. Yeah, and then under health, nutrition, child mortality, and so on and so forth. For this, indicators, yeah, of of the different dimensions just now. Okay. So there is, uh, as I said, as I mentioned earlier on, globally there has been a reduction in poverty, and one of those countries that has done so well in terms of reducing poverty is China. Okay, so if you look at China, dia punya poverty rate was 85% in 1981. So in other words, almost 90%. Yeah, 85% of the population of China are poor. But now, about 15 to, well, now meaning 2011, but by 2025, I think it has, sorry, in 2005. But now the figure must have gone down much lower. Yeah. Um, okay, so the percentage of population in China living below poverty line fell more in some periods than others during 1981 to 2000. So it has gone down from 1980s and gradually lower. So actually, if you look at the impact of China's reduction of poverty, because of the large population of China, that pulls down the figure for the world population poverty throughout the world as well. Okay? So that is the impact. So this is the one that shows the impact of China's poverty reduction. Yeah. So if you take out China, for example, this one here is including China, right? So you can see from here, if it is based on different rate lah, just look at $2 a day, for example. It has gone down from almost 60% in 1980s to now overall to about 40% in the world average. Yeah? But if you take out China, you pull out China from from that equation there, you can see it's quite flat. Yeah, there is an improvement overall, but the effect here is greater impact is because of Chinese factor here. In other words, if you don't take into account the poverty reduction in China, the rest of the world, for example, in terms of poverty reduction, tak banyak, yeah, not quite significant. Okay, so only about 10% reduction if we are to take out China from the equation. Okay, so what percent of the world is actually rich? The wealth of the 1%, the richest people in the world amounts or accounts for about 110 trillion dollars, US dollars, which is about 15% more, 50 times more, bukan persen, 50 times more, 50 kali ganda the wealth held by the bottom 70%. Ya, 70% of the population earning so little. Yeah. So the 1%, top 1% are earning 15 times more. And the poorest 40% of the world population accounts for 5% of global income. Okay, ya, tak betul lah ni. Kalau sepatutnya 40% of the world population should be earning 40% of the global income. But the situation is as such. And the richest 30% accounts for 3/4 of the world population. So in other words, there is global wealth is very, very unequal. Yeah, inequality in the world in terms of population. Few rich people and so many poor people. Okay, just to illustrate. Yeah, with regard to the imbalance between the rich and the poor. Okay, so many poor people are sharing very little, while as so few rich people, they own so much. Yeah. And in Latin America, the highest disparity rate in the world between the rich and the poor. Yeah. For example, the income inequality in the region, I mean, in Latin America had worsened, where the richest 10% of population actually earning 48% of its total income, yeah, in the region, 48%. And and while the poorest 10% earns only about 1.6% of the total income. Okay, so race has also been a factor whereby indigenous people and also Afro-descended people, black, yeah, and indigenous people of Latin America are at considerable disadvantage, ya, kalau dibandingkan dengan the white people, yeah, respect to the white, with the latter, the whites earning higher wages in the region. So that is the situation in Latin America. Okay, so how do we measure inequality in poverty? Okay, number one, it's by using size distributions, yeah, whereby it deals with individual persons or household and the total incomes they receive. So people are divided or distributed based on that. Okay, and so source of income and the way it is derived is not important. Jadi yang penting di sini adalah berapa banyak income and also how many people, yeah, receive those income. Okay, so the total population, individuals or household, are arranged in the ascending personal incomes and divided into this house. This house meaning 10 part lah, 10 bahagian, or quintiles, ya, 5 bahagian. Okay, then determine what portion of the total population of national income is received by each of the income group tadi. So, for example, what percent of the national incomes are earned by ataupun belongs to those lower 5%, for example, lower 10%, the next 10%, and so on and so forth. Right? Kalau kuantal ni bagi 5 lah. So the lower 20%, how much income belongs to them. So, yeah, jadi begitu. So, and then look at the bottom 20% and compare with the top 20% of the population and see how much incomes do they have, right? How much different incomes do they have? And so you can see the difference between the rich and the poor. Yeah? And this is a typical size distribution of personal income in a developing country, yeah, by income shares, quintiles, and decile. Quintile itu dibagikan dengan 5, sorry, I was saya confused tadi, ya, dengan 5, so sepatutnya ada 20 bahagian lah. Right? Kalau quintiles, sorry, kalau ini quintiles bagi 5, kalau decile bagi 10. So you can see from here, for example, the top, for example, 10%, they are earning like 28% of the income, total income. Okay, and the bottom 10%, they're only earning like 1.8. This is just one example, yeah, of distribution of income. Yeah. Okay. Right. So this is example in the Philippines, whereby the top 10% are earning about 35.3% of the total income, while as the bottom 10% only earns about 2% of the total income. Okay. So by right, if there is no inequality, this line here, the line should be around here. So anybody, for example, 10% of the population should be earning like 10% lah of the total income. 50% of the population should be earning like 50% of the total income. Then it would be equally distributed. Okay, but in reality, there is a lot of inequality. Yeah, the top earning so much, the bottom earning so little. Okay, all right. So okay, so that is based on distribution income today. The second methods of measuring inequality is what is known as the Lawrence curve. Lawrence curve ya, coefficient yang digunakan adalah Gini coefficient. Yeah. So this is the second most common measure. Okay, so that one here is the line of equality. So meaning there are 20% population, by right they should be earning like 30% of the income as well. 40% should be earning 40%, and so on and so forth. Right? Then that is equal. Ya, 60% populasi, 60% juga pendapatan. So there is no inequality. That is the line of equality di sini. Okay, but in reality, you find something different. Okay, what you get is something of this nature. The Lawrence, this is the Lawrence curve we're talking about. Yeah. So the Lawrence curve, yang ini, shows a degree of inequality that exists in the distribution of two variables. Okay, two variables. Variable one is the cumulative percentage of income. Variable two is the cumulative percentage of population. Okay, so that model was developed by an economist by the name Max Lawrence, and that's how the name came about. Anyway, name after the person in 1905. And often, this is often associated with income distribution calculation. Now, to calculate the income inequality, we use Gini coefficient. Yeah? Gini coefficient. This one was developed by a person by the name of Gini, or Corrado Gini, an Italian statistician. Right. So the equality diagonal represents perfect equality. This one here, the center straight line here. This is perfect equality. Okay. So at every point along the line, at every point, cumulative population equals cumulative income. Yeah. So income population here, and that is the cumulative income on this side. Yeah. Population income. So A would be area A here is equals to the equality diagonal population, which is the income. Yeah. While as B here on this side here is the difference, or rather the Lawrence curve itself. Yeah. This is the curve, Lawrence curve, and the difference between equality and reality, the C. Okay, so the calculation is based on this one here. Yeah. So the more unequal the population is, the income is, the lower would be the line, the Lawrence curve here, more towards the corner here. In other words, this area will be bigger. Area A is much bigger than in relation to the total area of the triangle. Okay, so the lower this line is, the greater the inequality. Okay? And this is based on the plot lah sebenarnya. We find out, for example, 40% berapakah pendapatan mereka, kalau 60% berapakah pendapatan in terms of their pendapatan, how much do they earn. Okay, so based on the Lawrence curve, okay, so at any point along the line, for example, okay, C represents, for example, the income of 30% of the population, which is, if you look at here, mungkin less than 10%, right? And so on and so forth. So the bottom, the top 10% earning so much lah di atas ini kan. So the Lawrence curve shows the actual quantitative relationship between the percentage of income recipients and the percentage of total income received in the particular year. So based on that, yeah, approximately the bottom 20%, for example here, is receiving about 5%, more about 5% of the total income in the country. Okay, 5% saja, yeah. And the poorest 80%, if we look at the poorest 80% here, go up, yeah, and then go left. They are earning about 50% of the total income. So 80% penduduk earning about 80% of total income. So the top, in other words, the top 20% are the rest who are earning the other half of the total of the population of the total income tadi. Yeah, top 20% are sharing the rest of the 50% of the total income, while as the majority of the poor tadi they have to share the 50% of the national income, the other 50%. Okay. So the ratio of the area between the Lawrence curve, A here, and the line of equality, which is this one, right, to the total area of the triangle, right? So the Lawrence, the Gini coefficient is referring to this. So area under the line here and the curve, yeah, in relation to the total area in the triangle. So the bigger the area A is, the larger would be the Gini coefficient. So the larger the Gini coefficient, the greater is the inequality. Itu maknanya. Okay. So the bigger the area is in relation to area A plus B, the greater will be the inequality of income in the country. So in the less developed country, inequality is more prominent kalau dibandingkan dengan di negara yang sudah maju. But Gini coefficients memang, I mean, inequality berlaku di mana-mana negara lah, but di pada nilainya, value of Gini coefficient is based on the difference, yeah, in terms of the income. Yeah, if there are a lot of equality, the lower will be the value of Gini coefficient. For example, if you look at this figure here, 1 and 2, for example, this is 1, this is 2. So you between 1 and 2, 2 has relatively unequal distribution ataupun Gini coefficientnya lebih tinggi di sini dibandingkan dengan this apa namanya nombor 1 di sini, ya, where this is the area under the line equality dengan curve tu kecil, ya. So if you divide this area with the total area under the curve, maka nilainya semakin kecil, ya. So relatively equal secara umum, ya, relatively equal lah, tak bodoh, there is some amount of inequality, but the inequality is quite small, right? Sini banyak besar. Okay, now that's the same thing. Just trying to explain more this, right? So the more inequality is in the country, the bigger will be this area. In other words, the curve tu lebih luas lagi, ya, lebih extended towards the right side. Yeah, the smaller inequality, the closer would be the Lawrence curve to the line of equality yang sini. Okay. Now, a country or two countries may have the same Gini coefficient. In other words, dia punya nilai A divided by A plus B mungkin sama, tetapi bentuknya mungkin berbeza. Contohnya, ya, the one with the green curve here, dia punya inequality itu banyak berlaku pada peringkat atasan lah, ya, the top apa nama 50%, for example. While as the bottom 50% ni, the rate of inequality will be is smaller compared to area ataupun country A. Yeah. So country A mempunyai inequality banyak pada peringkat the less the bottom 50%, for example, right? And then lebih baik kalau bandingkan country B pada peringkat the higher income group. Jadi nilai koefisien tu mungkin sama, tetapi the shape of the Lorentz curve tu mungkin berbeza. Okay, jadi so so it makes sense untuk membuat analisis. So walaupun Gini koefisiennya sama, tapi kemungkinan bentuk ataupun shape of the curve mungkin berbeza. Okay, right. These are some examples of Gini coefficient in different regions of the world. So the one with very high Gini coefficient, a lot of inequalities are here. Yeah, in Latin American countries, even in US too. Yeah, Gini coefficientnya tinggi, walaupun negara tu kaya, tetapi at the same time there are a lot of inequalities in the country as well. Countries with small Gini coefficient are these countries in Western Europe, negara-negara in Western Europe lah, and Canada, Australia, and some other parts of the world here, Central Europe, and so on, mempunyai Gini coefficient yang sederhana. Okay, kita di Malaysia, where are we? Kita is group under yellow, masih tinggi, dia punya inequality, Gini coefficient kita tinggi. Maknanya the gap between the rich and the poor are still quite high, 40% or 0.45 to 0.49. Okay, sangat tinggi. Right, so that's just to give you some ideas about inequality. So in the case of China, the gap between the rich and the poor also have risen as a result of the growth in the economy, but still the inequality also still exists, quite high in China, more than 35%, close to 40%. But the other thing is that you can observe the income of people in the rural areas, right? Also have, Gini coefficient, Gini index atau Gini coefficient adalah lebih tinggi di rural areas compared to the urban areas. Secara totalnya, perbezaan itu meningkat. Remember in the old days, prior to 1980s, 70s, and so on, negara tersebut mempunyai banyak equality lah. Semua orang, majority of people are poor, so all are poor. Jadi beza antara yang kaya dengan miskin tu kecil saja. But now, as the country get richer, the inequality, kekayaan orang yang kaya sangat kaya, orang yang miskin remain poor. Jadi inequality masih kekal tinggi. Okay, in Malaysia macam mana? Income inequality in Malaysia also tadi boleh dikatakan bahawa kita under yellow punya group lah. So in other words, the income differences between the rich and the poor are still quite high, in our country, more than 4, 0.4 something, Okay, so income equality in Malaysia widened even while median household income rose to 5,873 in 2009. Jadi income overall has increased, telah meningkat, tetapi while the average income has increased, at the same time perbezaan di antara low income group dengan high income group tadi semakin meningkat kembang. Difference become wider. So the rich, in other words, the rich become richer, the poor remain poor. Secara relatifnya. Right. So if I may share with you this one, there is this article pada tahun 2019 yang menyatakan bahwa as a median household income continues to grow in Malaysia, at the same time, statistics also show that income inequality has also grown up. Jadi both average household income meningkat, at the same time income inequality juga meningkat. Right? Jadi itulah keadaannya. Okay, so you can read the details nanti dalam apa nama link ini kalau nak tahu lebih lanjut berkaitan dengan income inequality. Okay, so but among those apa nama ni Gini coefficient ataupun income equality based on gross income increase for both the urban and rural. The urban is between 0.38 in terms of Gini coefficient, sedangkan di rural areas nilainya kecil lagi, even though they're quite close lah. Right? So among the population, among the Bumi Putra, is between 0.385 to 0.89. But among the Chinese, they are 0.411 to 0.417. Among the Indians, ini if you notice here, among the Indians banyak besar lagi. Sorry, perbezaan among the Chinese quite big, among the Malays and also the Indians ada kurang sikit, in terms of differences in income between the rich and the poor. Itu yang kita boleh translate daripada ni lah. Right? So this is how it is. Kita punya Gini coefficient since the 1980s, very high in 1980s between the rich and the poor. Now things are improving, but in terms of it's still quite high, walaupun telah turun sedikit, on average our income per capita telah meningkat, but at the same time the difference between the rich and the poor still remains quite high as well. Okay, so let me stop. Sorry about that. You can see that. My apologies. So let me share this one. This is what. Wow, you couldn't see that one just now. My apologies. Jadi I was trying to show you some of the attachment the figure tadi, and saya silap. So these are the things that I was sharing with you with regard to the income in Malaysia. Income inequality in Malaysia. Okay. The other things that I have shared earlier tetapi tak share sebenarnya adalah yang berkaitan dengan some other, this one. Okay, sorry. This one just now. In terms of the Gini coefficient. So and the map just now also saya minta maaf, saya tidak dapat share tadi. Okay, so let's go back to the lecture, the slide tadi. Okay, so what happened is, so in Malaysia, let me adjust this. So in Malaysia, actually, oh, hold on. I'm not supposed to do this. Right. Malaysia is ranked number 1 to 4, right, in the world, in terms of inequality ranking. Okay. So what we have is 38.4% of the world, di kekayaan dalam negara, are owned by 10% of the richest people. Okay? And the poorer 10%, 10% of population, they only own about 1.7% of the wealth in the nation. Yeah? Okay. And this one also, this slide shows the sorry about that. The Malaysia's real mean household income by income group. Yeah. So if you look at in 1970, the one in dark blue color are the top 20%. So the top 20% are earning more compared to the rest of the population. Okay, while as the bottom 40%, they have earned, in other words, they have increased their average income, but the rate of increase tak banyak sangat. They still fall below 4%. Yeah, of the in other words, dia punya punya mean income is less than 4,000. Yeah, less than 4,000. Okay, average income. Yeah. So the overall, the country is seeing an increase in the mean household income telah meningkat secara keseluruhan. Tetapi yang paling banyak adalah among the top 20%. So the middle 40% tu line dia macam lebih kurang macam the overall, macam the average tadi. Meningkat tetapi kurang kalau banding dengan high income group tadi. Okay. And then ini juga menunjukkan Gini coefficient in Malaysia. You can see that it has changed over the years. Ya, daripada apa nama ni 0.557, very big ya figure Gini coefficient, sangat tinggi dibandingkan dengan in 2000 has gone down by the way, has by 2019 has gone down to 0.417, but still high kalau dibandingkan dengan global standard lah ya, throughout the world ya, masih tinggi juga. Okay. So by ethnic group, yang paling tinggi adalah di kalangan Chinese, and lowest is among the Bumiputra. So why does it exist, income inequality? So income inequality is based on income differences between the people of Malaysia. Okay. So it is essentially the question of how much does one person make compared to the other. Ya, bandingkan dengan orang lain, macam mana kita punya income. So one reasonable level of inequality of income is not necessarily bad. Yeah? It can actually be stimulating for economic growth. In other words, high income inequality doesn't mean that it is bad for the economy as a whole. Cuma ianya menunjukkan apa nama pembahagian ataupun distribution of income itu tak sama, ya, banyak beza. So through social programs and taxes ataupun cukai dengan program sosial lain, the government can reduce inequality and make sure that everyone has at least something to survive and can live a decent life. Jadi ada macam-macam cara lah. Supply, provide electricity, provide clean water supply, provide telecommunication, apa lagi, bantuan kewangan pun ada sekarang ini. So all this, yeah, and also lately we have minimum wage. All those help to reduce the pain, ya, ataupun um, masalah kurangnya pendapatan. So overall, it apa nama dengan cara ini telah mengubah, ya, uh, keadaan bagi mereka yang kurang pendapatan ataupun the poor lah, ya, through various program and also cukai. Cukai di sini maksudnya those who are earning more that they get tax more, ya, cukai yang lebih tinggi. Dan cukai-cukai tersebutlah yang digunakan untuk melaksanakan untuk menjalankan program-program bagi membantu bagi meningkatkan quality of life of the poor people as well. Yeah. So currently only 0.6% of Malaysian population live below national poverty line. We have done very well as well. Less than 1% population living below poverty line. So we are actually on the right track juga lah. Yeah. So there are several things that could change to stimulate the reduction of income gap. Number one, increase the level of education. Ini satu cara yang baik sebenarnya. Yeah, because if you have good education, you are likely to be able to get jobs or employment which will pay higher salary. Yeah. So when Malaysian have higher level education and higher skills, it will reduce inequality in wages. Okay. Keduanya adalah increase government wealth distribution efforts. Okay, so the increase of government spending and social expenditure, for example, social programs, has been proven to reduce the income inequality as well as lessen poverty. Jadi macam-macam lah apa nama program yang telah dijalankan oleh kerajaan bagi membantu. Ya. Increase taxes for the top income brackets. Ini bagi orang yang high income kurang baik lah. So Donald Trump actually Donald Trump di Amerika, bukan di Malaysia. But contoh yang baik juga secara bandingan. So what Donald Trump is doing is to reduce income tax for those rich people because he himself is also rich. So by right, they should be taxed more. So the Democratic Party actually demands for higher tax untuk orang yang kaya so that it will benefit poorer people actually, yeah, the majority people. Okay, so the tax rate for top income bracket Malaysia is low at 25% kalau dibandingkan dengan negara lain di Asia ini. Contohnya Korea 38%. If you're earning like 1 million, for example, in a year, then 380,000 of that money goes to pay for your tax, income tax. Okay, so the more you earn, the more tax that you pay. Yeah, 35% in Thailand and so on. Yeah. Okay, so income inequality is happening everywhere, right? It is a global trend, ya, sama. Ya, tapi kalau kita lihat juga bahawa negara-negara seperti advanced economies in Europe, dia punya Gini coefficients are lower compared to many of the sub-Saharan Africa and also countries in other countries in Asia and Pacific as well. Okay, so income inequality is highest, even though it is falling, dah turun secara keseluruhannya, and in Latin America and lowest in advanced and emerging market seperti Europe. Jadi itu trennya. Okay. Jadi kita ada income gaps between the rich and the poor. So contohnya kalau di Japan the income gap is about 4.5, ya. The average income, the richest 10% as multiple of poorest 10% lah. Jadi maknanya di Jepun orang yang paling kaya apa nama ni, dia punya income is 4.5 times those of the poor. Jadi maknanya most people are earning quite well, yeah, in Japan. So you can see there, yeah, good low apa namanya, inequality itu kurang di Jepun. South Korea pun not bad ya, 7.8%, ya, 7.8 times. Apa namanya, income of the rich 10% is about 7.8 times, 7 kali ganda ataupun 7 hingga 8 kali ganda pendapatan mereka 10% yang terendah. Okay, so India juga sama, Vietnam ya, at less than 9 times, Indonesia about 9 to 10 times, tapi Malaysia tu sangat-sangat tinggi. So we have a lot of problem out as far as inequality is concerned. Yang top 10% are earning about 20 times more than those income of the lower 10% of the population tadi. Ya, poorer 10% tadi. Okay, Singapore pun tinggi, but not as high as China, as Malaysia. Okay, and these are the figure down here is the per capita gross national income. Jadi semakin tinggi kita punya gross national income, semakin luas pula ya dia punya gap between the rich and the poor. Okay. Okay, so Singapore walaupun tinggi, tetapi on average dia punya income tinggi, so it's not too much worry lah. Okay, tapi di India, India the national average is about 5.350. Jadi walaupun ada difference and all that, tapi secara average-nya dia punya income tu agak sama lah, not much different kan, even the richest. Yeah, alright. So who are the poor? These are people who are likely to be poor, people who live in the rural areas, not solely because of income, but because of other things like in terms of facilities seperti jalan raya, bekalan air bersih, electricity, and so on and so forth. Ya, masuk sekolah juga. Ya, other groups, people, women. Ya, women are more likely to be poor kalau bandingkan dengan lelaki. And also people who are poor are likely to be minorities and also indigenous people as well. Right? So kebanyakan mereka ni juga classified or group under apa namanya, the poor because the income, ya, sumber-sumber pendapatan tu agak terhad. Disabled people, children, youth who are unemployed. Yeah, if they don't have a job, and they are also many of them are unemployed. Elderly, yang orang tua yang telah pension, telah retire and so on, and so they earn little. So they tend to be poor or poorer compared to the other population. So, for example, if we talk about rural poverty, yeah, rural areas account for 3 in every 4 or 3/4 lah people living on less than $1 a day. Yeah. In Asia and Africa, 80 to 90% of the poor live in the rural areas. Sama juga Latin America, about 50% of poor are living in rural areas. And most of the rural people are involved with subsistence agriculture. And so based on this, yeah, development should be focused in the rural areas. So one of the rationale for focusing on rural areas as far as development is concerned. Okay, now these are some of the features of life, yeah, in the rural areas. Ya, jadi subsistence farming, water supply tidak ada, saya terpaksa bawa daripada satu tempat yang jauh, and so on, ya. And children, some don't go to school without food, and so on and so forth. Okay, so in terms of poverty, memang kalau kita bandingkan di antara rural versus urban, kebanyakannya adalah di kawasan Lower Bandar, right? Yang ini dibandingkan dengan urban areas. Okay, yang keduanya adalah wanita juga, ya. More than 70% of the poor in the world are women, and they either do not have or have very little access to education, in certain parts of the world, and other government programs, particularly in developing countries. So kalau ada program itu kebanyakannya diberi kepada kaum lelaki dan jarang diberi kepada kaum perempuan. So most households headed by women, yaitu single mothers, are also poor. So generally, the income levels of women in most developing countries are low dibandingkan dengan kaum-kaum lelaki. Right? So, but they do a lot of work. Yeah, they work hard. They carry water. They do the farming and so on and so forth. Yeah. So, yeah. So these are some of the features regarding the kind of work, the kind of life that women are involved in. Yeah. Right. Okay. So Ken, and then the other group yang saya kata tadi are minorities, indigenous people. Yeah, and these are people who tend to be poor as well. Sebab apa? Because of the living condition, the place where they live, and so on. Yeah. So indigenous people all over the world, in South America pun ada, Australia pun ada. Okay, kita di Malaysia pun ada, termasuk apa nama orang asli, orang-orang indigenous group di Sabah, Sarawak, and so on. Yeah. And all over the world actually. Many of them are displaced. Yeah. And for example, if you talk about people in the upper Rajang and so on who are being displaced by the hydroelectric power, HEP project and so on, the dam, right? So that has also impacted their life as well. Okay, so minorities and also the disabled or displaced people, children, because they're not earning and therefore chances are they are poor, classified as poor. The youth too, yeah. All right. So these are some pictures of indigenous people in Mexico, the Chiapas group, for example. About 15,000 of them, of the people died due to poverty and died of curable disease or illnesses. Penyakit yang boleh dirawat dan sebagainya. Tetapi oleh kerana miskin, tempatnya mungkin jauh daripada bandar dan sebagainya, maka mereka kematian itu boleh di control actually. Yeah? And more than half of the population of Chiapas lives in poverty, and they have the highest rate of illiteracy, tidak bersekolah in Mexico. And 60% of homes have no clean drinking water, and most of the land are owned by rich landowners. So yang macam ini mungkin mengusahakan tanah bukan dia sendiri, tetapi disewa ataupun di rented out from landlord, rich landlord. Begitu juga dengan di Philippines, for example. This is an example. So isu yang mereka hadapi adalah termasuk threats to land tenure, tidak punya tanah, lack of access to basic services, electricity, water supply, and so on and so forth. And also ada perkara satu lagi adalah internal displacement. Now they have to move out from certain area or place in order to give way to development and so on and so forth. Okay, jadi itu isunya. And then we have in Malaysia the orang asli. Okay, so they don't have access to clean water. For example, they bath in the river, they take water from the river, and the kind of house they stay in, the kind of life women are doing, and so on. Jadi ini adalah keadaannya di contoh keadaan di Malaysia lah. In other parts of Malaysia, this was taken in 1980s and early 2000, for example. Penyokong Parti Barisan Nasional, tetapi keadaannya teruk, rumah macam itu, and people yang ini menunjukkan budak-budaknya pergi ke atas untuk mendapat, I don't know why they mungkin dapat internet ke apa kan, ataupun tidak ada tempat untuk belajar. Okay, poor families. Ada juga yang minta sedekah, di bandar, beggars. Okay, and they bring not only bukan saja dia, tapi the whole family termasuk kanak-kanak bawa sekali. Okay, and then here also another picture showing the conditions of the rural poor. Ya. Anak-anak ini sebuah kampung dekat Gambang Pahang, dan Daif. Okay, so and this is in Sarawak, and this is in Penan community. I've been to this longhouse once, about, I don't know, about 20 years ago. I don't know how's the condition now. And that's how they live in small hut like this. Government has built a longhouse, very nice longhouse, but sometimes they don't live there. They prefer to live in something like a shed like this, yeah, simple house. Yeah, by choice maybe. Okay. Yeah, in Peru, so same thing. Yeah. So it's throughout the world, the Africa, the South America, Asia, and so on. Yeah. So as far as indigenous people are concerned, many of them are victims of marginalization and discrimination, and also too often they lack the rights to the land tenure, land rights, territories and resources that have nurtured them for generation. Jadi mereka tidak ada tanah lagi untuk diusahakan dan sebagainya. So all of this results in poverty. Okay, so this is why indigenous peoples, who account for about 5% of the total world population, are 15% of those living in poverty. Jadi mereka adalah di antara penduduk di dunia yang hidup dalam kemiskinan. Okay, disabled people, sebab dia tak bekerja, mungkin tak dapat kerja because of the condition, disabled. Alright, so limited lah dari segi opportunities. Yeah. They live under double burden of poverty and also disability. So in developing countries, the responsibility of care and support falls in the family. Jadi family yang apa nama ni, responsible for them, yeah, to support the disabled person. Yeah. Tapi di negara yang sudah maju, there are usually certain grants, certain support, special institutions, even special jobs too, yeah, to help people live for life even though they are disabled. Jadi negara yang miskin, negara dunia tiga, many of these countries do not have that system, yeah. So without support from the state, it is very difficult for them to access education, to have access to special care, and also for jobs, yeah. So disabled also often have difficulty to access transportation, communication, and information. Children, poverty berkaitan dengan kanak-kanak. So in poor families, children are very badly affected by malnutrition and has its most severe effect on children between the ages of 6 months to 2 years. So malnutrition means that the children can more easily get diseases, either die young or have poor physical and mental development. So poverty limits the access children have to educational opportunities. Yeah, because of poverty, they cannot send the children to school and so on. So the cycle of poverty itu berada di situ, ya. In other words, if you're poor, there's so many things you wish you could do but you can't, and that help or rather menyebabkan poverty itu akan balik kembali recycle, ya. Cycle of poverty tadi, daripada ibu bapa, nenek kepada anak dan sebagainya. Okay, so many poor children have to leave school before completing even secondary school. Setengahnya hanya sekolah sampai primary school, those who go to school lah. Among the youth, lack of education, for example, limits employment opportunities for young people. Okay, in South Africa, for example, with high unemployment rate, many young people have no hope of finding work in the formal sector. And also urban youth are also very vulnerable to getting involved in crimes, gangs and drugs, alcohol abuse, and so on. Right. Okay, so elderly, tak payah cerita lah, because there are many of them retired, and so their income pun turun lah. Ya, bagi yang ada pension tu okay sikit, ya. But those who don't have any pension, they need to be taken care of, yeah. Right, so some elderly depends on pension for survival, and quite often also those pension tadi dikongsi sama dengan mereka yang tak bekerja dalam satu keluarga tersebut, yeah. But they do contribute to society, you know. Many of the older people also have to look after grandchildren while the parents are working, yeah. But they are unpaid domestic work. Jadi tidak digaji lah sebenarnya, tapi membantu. Okay, with increasing aging population, the number of elderly population who are poor will also increase, yeah, in the future. Jadi apa masalahnya? Jadi mengikut trainer, the conventional development is therefore only development in interest of the rich. Yeah? So it's always important to ask questions like what sort of development is taking place here and who will benefit from this development and what things are being developed. Okay, so trainer mengatakan bahawa conventional development is a process which develop mostly the wrong things in view of the urgent need. Jadi tersilap, ya, mungkin, ya, tak betul to address the problem. So sorry about that. Balik, just a few more minutes, ya. Sorry, a few more minutes and then we're done. So conventional development is only that type development you get when you gear everything to maximize GNP. Jadi tujuannya untuk meningkatkan pendapatan negara, okay? Increase GNP, but the distribution too is another factor, and so on, yeah. Profits and so on. Jadi, so there is a huge gap between conventional development and appropriate development. Jadi appropriate development di sini adalah development which address the needs of the people. Right? So the development objectives must be redefined. Right? The focus development should be shifted from being solely to raise the GNP or income per capita. Otherwise, the majority will not benefit from the growth. So the approach to development should be made more comprehensive, whereby income growth will bring benefits to all societies, and that is what is meant by appropriate development tadi. Jadi instead of conventional development tadi yang hanya menekankan tentang apa nama ni, GNP per capita. Okay. Okay. So what are the choices in terms of poverty reduction? It is a twin function of the rate of growth. Rate of growth in economic must be there. Kalau tidak ada pertumbuhan ekonomi, agak susahlah untuk mencapai pembangunan. And also, if you want to distribute income, we need money in the first place. Jadi, tidaklah ada growth in GDP as well, ya. So, change the function of income distribution through policies designed to change factors of production. Jadi, perlu ada perubahan dari segi polisi yang membantu mereka yang kurang opportunities, kurang berpendapatan tinggi supaya mereka diberi peluang, ya. Change the concentration of assets and power and also education structure as well. Kita ada melakukan ini di negara kita. Jadi boleh dilakukan dah. Yang seterusnya adalah changing concentration tadi maksudnya power are shared, assets are shared more equally, and also provide opportunities for education for all. Yeah. Change the distribution of wealth through income ataupun property tax. Jadi if you earn more, the rich have to be taxed, perlu membayar cukai lebih tinggi dibandingkan dengan yang kurang berpendapatan. Jadi struktur cukai itu perlu dikaji semula. Ya. And raise distribution of wealth, kekayaan among the poor sector of population through government direct support to the poor. Jadi program-program and so on so forth itu perlu ditumpukan kepada mereka yang miskin. Ya. Contohnya international aid juga kalau adalah bagi negara seperti Afrika, South America, and also South countries juga bantuan daripada negara luar, international aid seperti for irrigation purposes di antaranya, ya, so on. Okay, so together with increased economic growth, the reduction in inequality and income differences, I believe to be the key in reducing poverty. Ya, ini mengikut kajian oleh Overseas Development Institute. So 3 main approaches to reduce poverty. One is to promote opportunities for the poor, promoting opportunities for the poor. Okay, so that they will be able to increase the income and escape from poverty. Okay, keduanya, enhancing security, itu reduce vulnerability and also enabling the poor to cope with unfavorable situations, ya, untuk membantu mereka. Contohnya, from climate change, from flood and so on and so forth, ya. Jadi mengurangkan. So they have a good harvest and so on and so forth. Ya. Tiganya, facilitate empowerment. Itu political and also institutional work to help the poor. Contohnya, encourage families to have smaller, encourage smaller families, for example. Use of family planning, yeah, reduce child mortality. And these are things that can work to help the poor, to help them realize that having smaller family is better for them and not to have large families. Okay, jadi itu adalah perkara yang berkaitan dengan tajuk kemiskinan dan juga inequality. Quite a long story, but I hope you get the gist of what I was trying to share with you. Itu berkaitan dengan the concept of poverty, how wide is the problem worldwide dan sebagainya, globally dan juga dalam negara, and the issue of inequality, macam mana ianya berlaku dan bagaimana untuk mengurangkan inequalities in societies and all that. Jadi that's all untuk kuliah yang kelima ini. I hope this recorded lecture or pre-recorded lecture will assist you in understanding the topic on poverty and inequality and how it relates to development or the lack of development. Thank you very much.